Welcome to the March 2025 edition of the Inside Nutley Podcast. I'm your host, Tom Greco, and today's guest is, among other things, one of our country's leading advocates for fair housing. She's a Nutley native, a Nutley High School class of 1975 graduate, and a 2019 Nutley Hall of Fame inductee, attorney Diane Citrino. Welcome, Diane.
Hi, Tom. I'm really happy to be with you today.
As I said in the introduction, you've spent a great deal of your career specializing in fair housing. What inspired you to take on that specific area?
I found myself when I was a legal services lawyer in Chicago working on a fair housing case. And once I worked on it, I realized how much is tied to fair housing. If you have a safe place to live, you can, and if you live in a place that has many opportunities for work, for education, for socializing with people, your life is really changed. And since this is a Nutley podcast, I really want to give a shout out to Nutley that part of why I know housing is so important is because I had such a wonderful experience growing up in Nutley and having a community that was so supportive and safe and had a great educational system.
Did you find it a challenge at that specific field at all? I mean, because I know that in certain places, fair housing is a very controversial subject.
Fair housing is actually quite a controversial subject. It's under attack even right now. And where I started my legal career, right after law school, I worked in the city of Chicago, which had some of the most violent anti-fair housing demonstrations with Dr. Martin Luther King marching there and being assaulted. And he said Chicago was worse than any city he ever saw in the South. And starting my legal education, my legal practice in the city of Chicago was quite surprising in terms of the hostility that I saw. And most of my legal practice since the 1990s, I've practiced in Cleveland, Ohio, and again, fair housing. I had many cases involving sexual harassment in housing. I had one of my first cases in Cleveland involved a firebombing of a Black family's home by a juvenile gang. I worked with the FBI when mutilated dolls were sent in people's mailboxes, targeting a Black family, bullets fired. Yeah, it's people think, oh, this is something in the past. That's not true.
What kind of emotional tolls those kind of cases take on you?
That's a great question. They take a huge toll. It's really tough. I have held my client's hand as a jury's deciding, what something's worth. I'll tell you, one of the biggest challenges I had was a woman who had severe disabilities and was being very exploited by the manager of the apartment where she worked. The manager was forcing this woman who had trouble speaking to clean so she was making her clean other people's apartments and hallways and things like that to remain as a tenant. And it was very hard for this particular person to communicate, but she had a very good social worker. And we went and had a jury trial because in retaliation, the landlord had done some pretty horrendous things to her. And the jury did find in her favor, but only awarded her, the trial was divided into two pieces. The first part was for actual damages, and then the second part was punitive damages. In the first part of the trial, the jury decided in favor of my client. And again, she couldn't speak. So it was a very challenging person to present to a jury, because she was physically deformed and couldn't speak. So they only awarded her for some pretty awful things, $3,000 in actual damages. And again, she won. But then there was a second part of the trial, which was punitive damages, where we were able to actually reach a negotiated settlement because the housing provider's insurance company did not want to have a punitive damage decision rendered. And it would have been pretty, I hope, substantial. So we were able to take that money and set up a trust fund, and she was cared for well, based on the settlement. But that took a huge emotional toll to me. I felt very sad that there was this big gap between, I guess I sort of saw it as people didn't think that her suffering was really worth much. And that was very painful to me.
Wow. I give you a lot of credit. That can't be an easy job.
Well, it's nice to be able to make a difference. And I appreciate my clients. It was a joy to work with most of my clients.
All right. Let's flip it a little bit and go back in our time machine. All right.
Sure.
So where were you born?
I was born in Newark, New Jersey.
And did you always live on North Road?
No, until I was about 3.5 or 4, I lived on Roosevelt Street. And then we moved to North Road, where I lived until I went away to college.
Now, your dad was the Nutley Town judge, correct?
My dad was the judge in Nutley, which intimidated many boys in Nutley when I was in high school. My grandfather was the town doctor for Nutley. And my grandfather died when I was a child, but I remember his black bag and him making house calls. Absolutely.
Well, your dad was an icon in Nutley growing up. Obviously, everybody knew about Judge Citrino. Tell me a little bit about some memories about him.
Well, I just was reading about how my dad is the person who started the St. Patrick's Day parade. And since we just had, I think, an anniversary of the St. Patrick's Day parade, I think it's worth mentioning. It was really funny for me to think back on that. But my dad was a really charismatic guy, and very energetic and larger than life. It was a lot of fun to be his daughter.
Tell me about some of your favorite memories of growing up in Nutley.
I loved having such a sense of place being in Nutley. I really enjoyed like knowing that my family was so interwoven into the fabric of the community. I know you know some of my siblings. I'm the oldest of 5 children. My sister Marianne was next. Then came Suzanne, who's married to Tim Marr. Then my brother Rob, who's married to his wife Mary Lee, and my sister Vicky, who's a judge in the area, and she's married to Jerry Rotella. And Marianne's married to Wake. I mentioned Sue being married to Tim because I think everybody knows the Marr family, also a big Nutley family, and many people probably know Vicky's husband, Jerry Rotella. One thing I love about Nutley is if you know somebody from Nutley and they know you're from Nutley, they're always saying, oh, I know somebody from Nutley. And then like you totally know that they either know you or they know one of your siblings. So I really like that. And Sue and Tim, when they went to Rutgers and Douglas, they were known as Mr. and Mrs. Nutley.
Now, you were neighbors with the Pavlovskis, right?
Stash Pavlovsky,
And Eddie.
yes.
Eddie was my age. Remember Eddie?
Okay.
What is it? I heard with story something about the Patty Duke show and you and the Pavlovskis.
Oh, wow, you really have done your research. So I was a big fan of the Patty Duke show, which involved identical cousins who were very different and they had different accents. And Stash Pavlovsky had sort of a crush on me or jumped down from he was always doing stuff to kind of get attention. And one day I put on a wig and told him I was Diane's identical cousin and talked in a funny accent. And I think he believed it. I think he believed it.
I lived around the block from you when we grew up, and I can remember hearing all about these big parties at your house with governors and important people. Tell me about some of those times.
Okay, so yes, my dad was very involved in local politics, and one of my heroes was I call her my fake aunt. She was not my blood aunt, but was June Strzelecki. And June Strzelecki is probably the reason along with my dad, she was an attorney. She went to Harvard around the same time as Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So she was one of only a handful of women admitted to Harvard. And she was the first director of motor vehicles for the state of New Jersey. I think she was maybe the first female director of motor vehicles in the country. I'm not positive about that, but she was a political figure as well. And I know we had really fun fundraising parties for people my dad knew, like Aunt June, when they ran for office or did something like that. And I remember having to do certain, activities to prepare for the parties, but then, trying to sneak some of the food and running around and having fun.
So you graduated Nutley High in 1975. Looking back, what comes to mind every high school years?
Well, this is a really big high school reunion for me. This is the 50th high school reunion of the class of 1975. And I, as I mentioned, my dad went through Nutley High, and he did not get to go to his 50th reunion because he had died at age 51 in an accident. So his best friend went to the Nutley High reunion and brought my family back a t-shirt from there. And I just feel very strongly about that. I'm really looking forward to going to the Nutley High reunion, even though I haven't seen most anybody for decades. I really enjoyed my high school time, and I'd like to go back and celebrate with the people.
Well, speaking of high school, I have some pictures to show you. I want to get your comments on them, okay?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'd love to see some.
All right. Tell me what you think of when you see this.
Oh my gosh. That's my high school picture. A lot of hair, a lot of hair. And big hair with what everybody had parted in the middle. That was kind of the thing. Boys and girls, boys and girls.
The 70s look, right?
That was totally the look. Yes.
What's the house?
So there are four of us, Gina Bochicchio, Sharon Humiston, and Susan Clark, and me. We all agreed we would put the house in our little summary of what we put under our names. And that was that particular group of friends.
Okay. Were you a big fan of Simon and Garfunkel, or you just like the quote?
Yes. Oh my gosh. And I carried a picture of Paul Simon in my wallet from like 7th grade
Wow.
till probably through college. I loved Simon and Garfunkel. I still do.
Okay. How about this one?
Oh, yeah. So I played Elaine in Arsenic and Old Lace. This was the senior benefit. And I am quite I loved being in plays, and I was in a few dramatic things in high school and pursued it a little bit in college. But I loved being in this show. It was so much fun.
That's you on the far left sitting, correct?
Yeah, I'm sitting, I'm being terrified as my husband, Alex Cicerelli, is being yelled at.
Okay, how about this one?
This looks like one of the clubs I was in. Looks like, and that's me hugging Gina Bocchicchio, who was one of my good friends. And she, I believe, was our class president our senior year too.
Do you stay in touch with it with any high school friends?
I do, and really, it was really nice. I just got in touch with Susan Clark after a long time of being quiet, where we had lost touch. And I think people seeing that our 50th was coming up, people got interested in reconnecting.
Did you have any mentors, teachers, coaches that stood out for you in high school?
Well, one of my teachers, Harold Huntoon, he passed away when I was in high school, but he was my history teacher. He was wonderful. I would go back to 5th grade when I had Mr. Stabala, who went on to become the principal of Yantakah. But Mr. Stabala was my 5th grade teacher. He taught me the word agenda, and he would make a lot of jokes, and I thought he was the funniest, kindest, most wonderful man. And I also really loved our principal at Yanakah, Mr. O'Rourke. His son Tommy was in my class.
I was always scared to death of Mr. O'Rourke. Always. Maybe that was a boy thing.
Well, he was nice to me.
So then you're off to Brown. What made you go there?
I think I applied to about 5 colleges, and when I went, I think my mom went with me to visit all of them, except I got to go to Brown on my own and spend the night. And I think that's why I went there, and I loved it. It was a fabulous school, and Nutley had prepared me very well. I was a little scared to go because initially, everybody on their street was on my hall at Brown was, a valedictorian and gotten like perfect SAT scores, and had gone to private schools. It was a very different place. And I felt very at home and had a great time there. I felt Nutley High had prepared me really well.
So then, okay, you graduate Brown, then you head out to California to get your law degree?
Yes, then I went to the University of California at Berkeley and got my law degree from Berkeley.
Was Berkeley still kind of wild at that point?
Berkeley was totally wild, with lots of naked people jumping out, and people who dressed all in orange and handed out orange seedlings. And it was, I was there in the late 70s, early 80s, but you would have thought you were in the 60s. It was a crazy, crazy thing, and very wild and different for me. I loved going there, in having some a different experience from the East Coast. It was really fun to have that switch.
I was going to say it had to be kind of a culture shock, no?
It was a huge culture shock, huge. And then when I moved from California to take a job in Chicago, it was like going back in time. So to just give one example, in Berkeley, no one smoked cigarettes. They did smoke some other things. In Chicago, everybody smoked all over, just people smoked a lot. And, in Berkeley, there would be chants about Carter sent the junta aid, Reagan's ready to invade, no draft, no war, US out of El Salvador. And in Chicago, it would be the Pulaski Day Parade. I mean, it was very different cultural touchstones.
What made you go to Chicago?
I had gotten a job there in the summer between my second and third year of law school with the Chicago ACLU. And then I interviewed and I loved the city. And then I went and worked at a firm in Chicago for a short time before joining the Legal Assistance Foundation of Chicago, where I did public interest work.
And then from Chicago to Ohio? Is that the
Yes.
Tell me about your experiences in Ohio. I mean, you were there a long time, right?
I've been in Ohio since 1991. So
That's where you live now.
yes, I live in Ohio.
Right.
And I've loved living here. The legal field, I feel like I've been able to have a much bigger impact being here in Ohio, where it's a much smaller legal community. I mean, it's still a relatively large legal community, but it's much smaller than Chicago.
In Ohio, you also became a professor at Cleveland State, correct?
I taught a clinical program for 9 years as an adjunct. It was a really cool experience because I worked with law students and had them actually practice law on real cases. And the most exciting was we had a case that went all the way to the US Supreme Court. And so I got to bring my law students with me to the court, and they got to be present in the Supreme Court itself. So just so you know, the Supreme Court gets to pick most of their cases. Some cases must be heard by the US Supreme Court, but that's very small part of their docket. And then they have a part of their docket where they get to choose which cases. And out of the thousands and thousands of cases, they picked 72 the year that my case went up. But it was really fun to have law students involved from the very beginning of the case. I mean, there were different law students as it progressed, but it was a really exciting thing because very few lawyers actually get to have a case that goes all the way to the US Supreme Court.
I was going to say, how daunting is that? I mean, what kind of goosebumps do you get when you're getting ready to go before the Supreme Court of the United States?
Yeah, I sat second chair in that, so I didn't have to speak, but I was still terrified. And the person I worked with on it, he wasn't in great health. So it was sort of a like, maybe he's going to do it. Maybe I'm going to do it. It became clear he was going to do it right before. So I could relax a little tiny bit, but really I was pretty nervous.
It has to be intimidating.
Oh my gosh, it's super intimidating. Yeah. I think a lot of courtrooms they're often very beautiful, ornate, beautifully decorated structures, but they're meant in some ways to intimidate. And it's a very humbling experience to be in front of a court.
Going through your all the research, it's like every step that you've taken has been one greater accomplishment than the other.
Well, that's kind of you to say. I've enjoyed many aspects of my career.
I think reading up on you, one of the most incredible accomplishments is getting awarded the Rosa Parks Congressional Medal. Explain that. I've never heard of that, but just the fact that it's tied to Rosa Parks has to be something amazing.
Well, thank you. That was for part of my career, I worked at the Ohio Civil Rights Commission. So um, many states have a way that people can file complaints of discrimination in an administrative session, in an administrative way, so they don't have to have a lawyer necessarily. And then there's an investigation. So for a period of my career, 3.5 years, I worked as a regional director for the Ohio Civil Rights Commission and supervised investigators who looked into allegations of discrimination in housing, employment, and public accommodations. So during that period of time, they went out and investigated things, and I would defend their decisions. If there was probable cause that discrimination had occurred, then the Attorney General's office for the state of Ohio would take over. So it was the Ohio Civil Rights Commission which presented me with that award for my work during that time. So yeah, that was really very satisfying.
And now you're retired, correct?
Yes, I'm still doing a lot of things, but I'm not actively practicing.
What do you do with your spare time now?
I read a lot, just like that girl in the attic when I was little.
What do you like to read? What kind of books?
I like reading. I mostly read novels, but I also read nonfiction too. I just am very interested in learning different things. I still study Spanish. I have a tutor session via Zoom with a woman in Mexico because when I was 11 and decided I wanted to be a lawyer, I wanted to work with Spanish-speaking people. And when I was in Chicago, 95% of my clients spoke no English. They only spoke Spanish. So I felt like I commuted to a different country every day when I went to work. I smelled the tortillas cooking. I heard the music, and all day long I spoke Spanish to my clients and English with my opposing counsel. So my brain got fried, but it was really important to me to be able to keep up my Spanish. It's really hard to keep up your language skills if you don't practice. So I do that. I garden, I throw pots, I make pottery. I am a grandmother and spend a lot of time doing art projects with little ones, and volunteer at a variety of places.
All right, we're gonna do our quick hit segment now. We do that with everybody. So it's kind of like word association. So I'm gonna throw something out at you. Tell me what first comes to mind.
Okay.
Favorite Jersey Shore town?
Manasquan, where my sister lives.
Okay. Springsteen or Bon Jovi?
Springsteen. He was on the cover of Time when I started college. Bon Jovi's like, that's you guys. That's you're dating yourself.
No, I'm not that young, but I can see your point. Giants or Jets? I know you're not a sports fan, but we ask everybody this anyway. Giants.
I'm neutral totally.
Favorite fictional lawyer?
Oh, well, it's probably Atticus Finch from To Kill a Mockingbird.
I had heard that it was Perry Mason, but that's me.
Oh, well, Perry Mason, I did love Perry Mason, and I do think about well, my dad looked a little like Perry Mason, so I did love Perry Mason. So I do have to give a shout out to Perry Mason.
You were elected into the Nutley Hall of Fame in 2019. What did that mean to you?
It meant a huge amount to me. I'm really proud of it. I really also loved seeing Diane DeRosa, my drama school coach. She was in the audience that day. And as I said, I did have such a great experience in doing drama at Nutley High. And I just feel like it was really special. I know I want to give a shout out to Meredith Korbanek Blank, who I believe was part of getting me into the Nutley Hall of Fame by submitting a nomination. So I really appreciated that.
How has Nutley influenced your life?
I really have seen a lot of different cultures around, I've lived in, in New England, I've lived on the West Coast, I've lived in a couple of big Midwest cities. I really love that I grew up in Nutley. It gave me a real sense of community and knowing who I was. I mean, I think you really have a feeling of you belong in Nutley, and inclusiveness in a community, I think, matters so much to feeling like you're meant to be in the world. And it empowers you, it gives you a strong base, and you can go out and do great things.
Diane Citrino, thank you so much for joining Inside Nutley.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.